Hi, my name is Penelope Jones, and my presentation is on the portrayal of mental health in The Simpsons. So let's start off with my research question. How accurately are mental illnesses portrayed in the media? A quote from Northwestern University Medicine states that many TV shows and films have an alarmingly poor grasp of what it really means to have a mental illness and perpetrate harmful stereotypes that view the stigmas attached to it. This quote explains how filmmakers and producers fail to make accurate portrayals of mental illnesses, leading to inaccuracy in what we know about mental health on the screen. Although there have been previous discussion on how accurate characters' roles are in films compared to their said mental illnesses, there hasn't been an in-depth study conducted on characters in The Simpsons show. The Simpsons show, created by Matt Groening, has been around since 1989 for 35 seasons. The show consists of hundreds of characters, many of whom appear to have a mental illness in the show. Going about this topic, I wanted to pick a show that consisted of a wide variety of characters, episodes, and seasons to prove to be the most accurate. I had previously watched The Simpsons show, and rewatching every episode exposed me to deeper features lying within and hidden mental health aspects that are not generally talked about. With my research today, I'm going to be answering the question, how accurately are mental illnesses portrayed in the media, or more specifically, in The Simpsons show? So when deciding on my research, the method I chose was a correlational research. This method consists of a non-experimental research in which, as the researcher, I measure two variables and assess the correlation between them. The variables I'm measuring in this case are what we know about mental disorders from a medical standpoint and comparing that representation to the characters in The Simpsons show. To do this, I watched The Simpsons to gather data on many characters, I observed their thoughts and behaviors, and took note of anything that could correlate with a mental illness. I then researched the accuracy between the two and looked at other forms of media. With this, I had researched a bunch of articles when forming my experiment. However, the two articles that I found to be the best were these two. The first is meant to be used as a unit lesson plan for high school psychology classes. However, this article presents information on mental illness directly and in an organized manner. The article discusses the background on abnormality and the history of mental illness dating back to early times. It then dives into a discussion on mental health today and how different psychologists focus on different models and theories. The article also touched upon the DSM-5, however the most important aspect of this article to my paper was the actual definitions and descriptions of physiological disorders. This aspect was crucial to my paper because I was able to reference the different behaviors I noticed and compare them back to the medical definitions provided. Now my second article took the first article a step further. As I mentioned before, the DSM-5, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is the most important item to diagnosing mental health. This book, by the American Psychiatric Association, includes every description and symptom included under each mental illness and their medical terms. This in-depth analysis proved even more critical as I look at certain characters in The Simpsons and reference the DSM-5 for specific diagnosis to determine how accurate my results really were. In terms of the conclusions, my literature review showed me that there are a huge variety of mental disorders and symptoms, and it's important to research my findings in great detail and compare them to what is accurate. I also learned the layout I need to understand this type of study, which was super helpful when crafting and conducting my experiment. As previously mentioned, I watched Simpsons episodes and observed characters' behaviors and thoughts. 5 of some of the most well-known disorders were looked at the most. Keep in mind that the symptoms listed are included but not limited to under each disorder. So, looking at ADHD first, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a person with this disorder is easily distracted, as the inability to follow through, has difficulty organizing, and may have hyperactivity, or someone who is excessively active. In comparison to The Simpsons show, Bart Simpson is a character who falls under this category. He is the only son in the Simpsons family and has been known to bounce off the walls. We see relatively early on in the show the mention of ADHD. In season 11, episode 2, Bart floods his school's gymnasium and the schoolyard at Springfield Elementary. In a meeting with the school principal afterward, the Principal Skinner tells Bart's parents that he believes Bart has ADHD. To combat this, Bart's parents prescribed a psychostimulant drug, and he initially pays more attention in school, but then he suddenly turns psychotic. So his parents gave him a different medication. In season 24, episode 10, enough children at Springfield Elementary School needed to pass a standardized test or the school would be shut down. There were not enough passing scores to keep the school open. However, Bart had skipped the exam to explore nature. His sister Lisa encouraged him to study for the makeup test day to attempt to save the school. However, during Bart's studying, he couldn't sit still and he gave up studying quickly. With these two examples, we can see Bart is easily distracted, expresses hyperactivity, and has the inability to follow through. Looking at OCD, or obsessive-compulsive disorder. Symptoms include repetitive behaviors, fear of contamination, nail biting, and number performance. Looking at The Simpsons show, Lisa Simpson, one of the daughters in the Simpsons family, has expressed signs of OCD. In one particular episode in season 34, episode 15, Lisa has a collection of Malibu Stacy dolls, which are equivalent to our Barbie dolls. However, Lisa keeps them in their boxes. In this episode, Bart asks Lisa, why don't you take them out of their boxes? And her response is, if I take them out, then they won't be perfect anymore. This moment shows Lisa does things a particular way and has a fear of contamination. Next, a person with depression may experience mood episodes, have a loss of interest, feelings of worthlessness, and recurring negative thoughts. Lisa is a character that also fits under this disorder. In season 20, episode 17, Lisa is assigned to write a report on what Springfield will look like in the year 2059. She discovers online reports about poverty, war, and environmental disasters. This fills her with feelings of sadness and anxiousness. And to try to raise awareness, she accidentally terrifies her classmates with her dark, morbid visions of the future. Her parents take her to a psychiatrist who prescribes her with happy pills. And in another example, in season 23, episode 22, Lisa continues to struggle to fit in school. In this episode, Lady Gaga is passing through the town, and she notices how low the city's self-esteem is, and attempts to boost morale. However, no one in town is more depressed than Lisa, who is voted as the most unpopular student by her peers. In the first example, we can see Lisa experiences mood episodes and recurring negative thoughts about the future. In the second example, Lisa has lost interest in life and experiences feelings of worthlessness. Next, moving on to anxiety. Someone with anxiety may have excessive worry, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. Relating back to The Simpsons show, Marge Simpson, the mother of Bart and Lisa, has shown signs of anxiety. In season 6, episode 11, the family is on a plane to go on a trip somewhere. When first seated at the flight, Marge begins to make excuses wanting to leave the flight. She claims someone might have left the washing machine running, and she sits nervously ripping her paper continuously, and her breathing becomes labored. She ended up having a panic attack, screaming at the flight attendants to let her off as she ran up and down the plane. Marge then revealed that she had a fear of flying. This reaction expressed Marge's excessive worry, restlessness, and difficulty concentrating. The last disorder, which might not be as well known, is a conduct disorder. Those with this disorder may have aggressive tendencies, express impulse control, and physical cruelty, as well as the destruction of property. Bart Simpson fits under this category too. In season 8, episode 25, Bart's class goes on a field trip to the Springfield Police Department. Bart wanders away from the group, finding a room with several megaphones. He has the idea to line them all up in a row, going out a window. He then speaks into the megaphones, which amplifies his voice enough to create a sonic shockwave that shatters all the glass in Springfield. Bart enjoyed this act despite the repercussions affecting the entire town. Another example is from season 4, episode 18. On April Fool's Day, Homer Simpson, Bart's dad, played multiple pranks on Bart. Bart became angered by this and decided to get revenge. Homer loves beer, and knowing this, Bart shook one of his father's beer cans using a paint shaker from a hardware store. He then turned the thermostat up to psychologically trick Homer into needing a drink. When Homer retrieved the beer and opened it, its massive explosion put Homer in the hospital, paralyzed, and placed in a wheelchair. Although Bart shows remorse after this, his actions still show aggressive tendencies, impulse control, and physical cruelty. In the first example earlier with the megaphones, Bart expressed impulse control and destruction of property. As you can see, multiple characters fit under each category with a plenitude of examples as evidence. There are more mental disorders to touch upon than just these 5. I felt these examples provided the best description of my research and proved to have the most confounding results. Now, going back to my research question, how accurately are mental illnesses portrayed in The Simpsons show? We can see The Simpsons examples compared to the DSM-5 symptoms and definitions had a positive correlation. This accurate representation is a step in the right direction to reducing stigma and maintain exactness when it comes to mental health in the film industry. Some implications to my research is the discussion around the characters' disorders are apprehended. There have been previous theories and assumptions on some of the characters and their mental illnesses in the show. With this research, there are now facts to combat and correct assumptions. There's also an advancement for proper mental illness representation in the media. As mentioned back to the Northwestern University medicine quote, many TV shows and films do have an alarmingly poor grasp on what it really means to have a mental illness, and this can result in negative stigma. Picking a well-known show that has been around for years can produce positive results in the film industry. Lastly, the research proves reliability in the producer's choices as the results of my research proved positively. On the other hand, there are some limitations to my research. This study is unable to be generalizable to all mental illnesses. Due to time confounding factors, I was unable to research every single mental illness and connect it back with the Simpsons show. In addition, I was also unable to focus on all Simpsons characters. There are nearly 500 characters in the show, and there are time-restricting factors for diagnosing them all. The Simpsons show itself also confines me to use certain examples when referencing the show. There's also possible bias among the characters, examples, disorders in the show I chose to utilize. I chose examples that would best benefit my research, and characters were chosen based on how many examples they had in correlation with the disorder. Lastly, disorders were also chosen based on how often they were seen and the amount of characters that correlated with them. I want to thank you for your time, and here are my references.
Okay, here's my question. All right. What was one obstacle or challenge you encountered while implementing your research method, and how did you address it?
One of the biggest challenges I faced was organizing my information, because in the beginning I was I just had characters and mental disorders, and with my research, with my method, I had to connect the two. So it was a struggle at first figuring out how I would connect them, but eventually when I researched my method more, I figured out how to connect the two.
Thank you. Penelope, which of the various perspectives you explored was the most difficult for you to incorporate into your research inquiry, and why?
I think the hardest perspective to incorporate in my research inquiry was looking at other forms of media, because there were not a lot of information on the characters and the mental disorders combined together. So when going about that, I struggled to find a lot of information on how to support that decision.
Thank you.
What unanticipated turn did you encounter as your research progressed? What were the reasons for this change in direction, and how did you modify your method approach?
Something unexpected that happened when looking at my research was finding specific examples for situations that occurred with mental disorders in The Simpsons, because there's a lot of talk about generalizable examples within the show, but there was a lack of specific examples. So going about that, I struggled to dive deeper into the evidence that was given to me.
Any other questions?
Great, thank you, nice job, but I do have a question. After doing this work with The Simpsons, when you watch TV now, do you find yourself breaking apart or breaking down other characters in different shows, and has it changed your perspective at all about any other of the shows that you watch?
Honestly, I'd say not really, because I knew when I first watched The Simpsons that this was the show that I wanted to use, because there were so many situations and talk about it previously about mental illness being within the show, and I didn't feel that there was a lot of talk in other shows about mental illness that I watched, at least. So I felt that it was just specific to The Simpsons show and not to all ones that I watched.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question at all? No? All right, thank you very much.